Welcome back to another crochet tutorial with Cozy Rosie UK, and today I am sharing with you the beanie pattern from this very special collection that's been designed both by myself, Cozy Rosie UK, and High Desert Yarns, who has hand dyed this beautiful yarn for the collection. I am going to be using these beautiful yarns in these two different colours. Of course, you can opt to use just one or more different colours while we make these beautiful patterns. This is the first of 3 different patterns that I'm sharing with you on this channel that all feature this beautiful yarn, and I cannot wait to share this hat with you. This beanie pattern is beginner friendly and it's written for 7 different sizes from 0 to 3 months all the way up to large adult. I'm going to pop the sizes on the screen for you here so that you can see which one you need to make. And the width of the circumference of the head is how you're going to create the correct finish size. I will talk more about that as we move on. Now I'm going to be using 2 different colours in each row to allow us to create this beautiful finished look. Now the yarn that I am using today, as I've mentioned, is hand dyed by High Desert Yarn, and I'm going to be using 2 shades, both the Rose and the Autumn Poppy, which has been specially dyed for me. It's a size 3 or a DK weight yarn, and this is 100% merino. So depending on which size beanie you are making, that will of course impact on the amount of yarn that you need. If you're just making a single coloured beanie, you just need to add up both the yarn A and the yarn B amounts. These are of course estimated, and they are based on this beautiful merino yarn that I am using. So you can use this chart to make sure that you've got enough yarn before you even start your project. The recommended hook size is a 4.5mm, and that is exactly what I'm going to be using today. This is the only 4.5 I have in an ergonomic hook, and because of the short stitches that we're using, I have to go for an ergonomic hook to save my hands. So I'm going to be using this Furl Streamline. I can't even tell you which one this is. I'd like it to be Virgo, but I don't think it is, but it's definitely a star. It's one of the astrological signs, I think, but I really like this one. The reason I love these Furls hooks is because of the shape of the neck. Oh, if I can get it to focus. It's tapered a tiny bit, but it's got that lovely sharp point and enough of a hook to make things nice and grippy. And of course I've got my Furls hook tray because I hate it when my hook rolls away from me, and that just means that it's going to be in the place that I need it. So first things first, as if by magic, I am going to get my yarn caked up and ready to use. 3, 2, 1. There we are. We have some caked yarn. I haven't even chopped off the end of those knots, but I'm going to be using, as I've said, both colours. This is the Rose, this is the Autumn Poppy, and I'm going to be using both colours in the Rose. If you're not familiar with working your hats from side to side, it can be a little bit of an unusual concept to get your head around, because we're going to be working the ribbing and the bulk of the hat all in one go. I'm going to be working my ribbing in Rose because that colour does feature in this cake. So it just pulls out the rose tones in the Autumn Poppy, but allows that beautiful orange to sing. We're going to work the ribbing onto the bottom of our row and then work up for the body of the hat. So the circumference or the width of the hat that you're creating is going to be determined by the number of rows you make, not the beginning chain. The beginning chain that we're going to start with actually creates your overall height of your hat. If you're looking to create a slouchy beanie, you can opt to add the extra length onto your ribbing, so you can increase the number of beginning chains, by 4 or 5 to add an extra inch onto your ribbing. So I'm going to start by making my beginning slip knot with colour A, which for me is Rose, and this is the colour that I'm using for my ribbing. And I'm making quite a short ribbing, so the number of chains that you make in colour A is going to determine the length of your ribbing. So for a beginning chain for size 0 to 3 months, you're going to do a chain of 5, as will 3 to 6 months and 6 to 12 months. For toddler, child and adult, we're going to be making a chain of 7, and then a large adult is going to make a chain of 9, and then we're going to change to colour B. And I'm simply going to place that over my hook, place it over my hook and pull it through and just tighten that down. So this gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 chains, and then I'm going to work the remainder of my chain in the hat colour, which for me is the Autumn Poppy. If you are making a 0 to 3 month size beanie, you're going to make a total of 22 chains in colour B. If you're making 3 to 6 months, that will be 24 chains. 6 to 12 months will be a total chain of 28 in colour B. Toddlers will need a 30. Child will be 32. Adult, like I'm making, is going to be a chain of 34. And then a large adult will be 42 chains, all in colour B. So we can see that we've worked our chain in 2 different colours, and yes, we have ends. We're not going to worry about those just yet, but it's going to really help us identify which stitches we are working our ribbing in and which ones are the bulk of our hat. To help our hat really taper in at the top of our head and not create too much bulk, we begin by working single crochets into the first few of our chains, by working into that second chain from hook, working a single crochet, that's a US single crochet, the same as a UK double. And we're going to work that into the next 3 stitches as well. So we're working 1 single crochet into each of the next 3. So that's 1, 2 and 3. And from here, we're going to begin our stitch that's going to be repeated throughout this pattern, which is known as the wattle stitch. So working into our next stitch, we're going to work a single crochet, a chain 1, and then a US double crochet, the same as a UK treble, into the same chain. Pull through 2, pull through 2. So this is our wattle stitch, which has a single crochet, a chain 1 and a double crochet. We then skip the next chain, ready to work into the next, repeating that wattle stitch, inserting our hook to work a single crochet, a chain 1, yarn over to work our double crochet into that same chain. We skip the next and repeat that again, working a single crochet, a chain 1, and we yarn over to work a double crochet into that same chain. So you can see how this is going to reduce the bulk at the top of our hat, and then we're going into our stitch repeat, where we skip 1 and we're working our wattle stitch into the next, which is a single crochet, a chain 1, yarning over for a double crochet worked into the same chain. We're going to repeat this all the way down until you reach your colour change, or in my case, my last 7 stitches, because that's where we're going to work our ribbing. So we're going to skip the next and continue repeating our wattle stitch all the way down to our colour change. So continue across and I'll see you shortly. So once you worked all the way down, you should have 1 chain remaining in your colour B, and I'm going to pull back just that final stitch to help make our colour change as seamless as possible. So I'm just working my double crochet once again and stopping halfway through, and then I'm going to complete my yarn over for that double crochet in colour A. I'm going to drop colour B and just leave that behind, ready to work into that first chain in colour A, and this time we're simply working 1 single crochet into each stitch across. It's a little bit tight to get your hook through that first one because I'm pulling on the yarn. I'm just going to pop my hook through and work 1 single crochet into each stitch across. So at the end of row 1, you should be looking, oh my goodness, a little bit like that. Ends everywhere, always my favourite thing. But it's going to be worth it to have our ribbing worked in a different colour, all in the same one piece. So going into row 2, we begin with our chain of 1 and we turn. And we're going to be working 1 single crochet into the same as our chain 1. And because we're making a ribbing, I'm going to make sure I work through the whole of the stitch on that first single crochet where that chain 1 is, to help give us a really beautiful edge. And then for the rest of the section in colour A, we're working into the back loop only. So I tilt mine towards me and we're looking to pick up just the back loop of our stitch. The way I do that is just by finding the centre and pushing my hook out the back to pick up that back loop. And we are working a single crochet into each of those single crochets from the previous row, but this time just into that back loop only. To make sure that our colour changes are as seamless as possible, I'm just going to pull back on that last stitch once again and insert my hook into that back loop only, just picking up colour A, and I'm going to complete my yarn over with colour B. Now you notice I've brought colour A towards me because I want to keep all the colour changes on the wrong side of my project. Don't fall off my hook now. There we are. And that just means we're ready to continue, and we're keeping our yarn on the even side, so we're keeping it towards us. We're going to skip this double crochet from the previous row and work into the chain 1 spaces that we created, which is not there, it's actually there. So there's the double crochet that we made. If you look from the top, there's our chain 1 and there's our single crochet. We're working into the chain 1 spaces, so I'm inserting my hook, ready to work a wattle stitch into that chain 1 space. So a single crochet, chain 1, yarn over for our double crochet, worked into that same chain 1 space. We then skip the next 2 stitches, ready to work into that next chain 1 space, which is here. That's our beginning chain, and here's our chain 1 space. So we insert to work our single crochet, we chain 1, yarn over to work our double crochet into that same chain 1 space. We skip the single, the double, ready to work into our next chain 1 space, working a single crochet, chain 1 and a double crochet. I'm going to repeat that all the way across, working into those chain 1 spaces up to our last 4 stitches. We're just going to repeat that wattle stitch all the way across, and it's always worked into the chain 1 space. So continue to repeat that all the way up to your last 4 stitches, and I will meet you there. I'm just working my final wattle stitch before my last 4 stitches, but actually I forgot to say it's your last 5 stitches, because we're going to skip that single crochet at the end and we're going to work into the last 4 only. So we skip 1, working 1 single crochet into each of the last 4 stitches. These aren't worked into the back loop, we're not ribbing here, we're just reducing the stitch height at the top of our hat to help reduce some of that bulk at the top of our hat. I love how this colour pulls when it's worked from side to side. Going into row 3, we start with a chain of 1. We're turning, and for row 3 we are working 1 single crochet into the same as our chain 1 and into each of the next 3. We're then going to work our wattle stitch. We skip that next double crochet, working into the chain 1, working our single crochet, a chain 1 and another double crochet, all into that same chain 1 space. We're then skipping 2 and working only into our chain 1 spaces with that single crochet, chain 1 and a double crochet. We're going to repeat that all the way down, working into those chain 1 spaces, and I'll meet you when you reach your colour change or your ribbing all the way down here, and you'll have 1 stitch remaining after your final chain 1 space. So continue across and I'll meet you ready to work the rest of row 3. So I'm halfway through my final double crochet, ready to change colours back to my colour A. So I'm just going to drop colour B, pick up the working yarn of colour A, making sure I'm not tangled, and I'm just going to yarn over with colour A to complete that final stitch. We're skipping that single crochet from the row below and working into the back loop only. I'm going to work a single crochet into each stitch across to the last stitch. And into that final stitch we are simply working a single crochet. You can really, oh wow, these colour poolings look lovely, don't they? So you can really see that stitch pattern is just giving us a nice little touch of texture alongside what could be considered a busy yarn, but actually the colour pooling is really quite nice. Now, believe it or not, that's all you need to know to complete your hat. We're going to repeat rows 2 and 3 to create the bulk of our hat, and depending on which size you make will depend on how many times you're going to repeat rows 2 and 3. So for size 0 to 3 months, you're going to repeat rows 2 to 3 for a total of 57 rows, or until your ribbing measures 14 inches when it's lightly stretched. For 3 to 6 months, that's going to be 63 rows and a measurement of 15 inches. For 6 to 12 months, it's going to be 67 rows and a measurement of 16 inches. For a toddler, you're going to be looking at 75 rows for a total circumference of 18 inches. For a child, you're going to look for a 20-inch circumference, which will be about 86 rows. For an adult, we're going to be doing 89 rows, and that will give us 21 inches across our ribbing. And then for a large adult, you're going to be doing a total row count of 96, which will give you a circumference roughly of 23 inches. Now you need to measure from row 1 across your ribbing to the last row, and we need to end on a repeat of row 3 so that we can continue on to seam our hat beautifully. Continue on and I'll meet you back once you've worked all those repeats. I wanted to show you what your colour changes will look like if you keep all your colour changes on the wrong side. You'll end up with a line marking the end of your ribbing, but on the right side of your project it will be absolutely beautiful. Now you're going to have repeated rows 2 and 3 enough times once your ribbing measures the circumference of your hat. Because the stitches are taller in the wattle stitch, we have to measure along our crochet ribbing. Now this is for me and I'm quite small in my head. So this has a finished size of 20 inches and it will stretch. There is excess fabric in the bulk of the hat to give it more of a slouchy look, but it's that ribbing that does stretch quite a lot, as you can see. I'm absolutely loving how this draws out the rose colour from that hand-dyed yarn. There are a couple of ways that you can join or seam your hat together. You can simply choose to whip stitch the two sides together with the wrong side facing you. I am going to slip stitch through my stitches, and actually the way that you're going to work your sewing and your slip stitches are the same, so it is completely up to you which one you do. Whichever option you choose, ensure that you leave enough yarn to sew up or slip stitch through with colour A for your ribbing, so that you're not running the risk of seeing any of the different colours show through. So if you want to slip stitch, you can just continue to follow this video and I'll take you through that now. So to slip stitch these together, we're going to have the right side facing in, so that we have this line from our ribbing, the wrong side facing towards us. So our hook is on the back and we're bringing the other side of the hat towards us. So we're going to insert our hook through that first single crochet on the opposite side of our beginning chain. And then we're going to insert our hook into the same first stitch that we had, or the first remaining stitch on the other side. And we're just going to slip stitch those together. We're then going to work through the next one and into the next on the other side of our hat. So we have 4 single crochets at the top. And this is the last one for me. And then we're going to work across the wrong side of our chain and into our stitch pattern. So we've worked into this chain here. So we've got our stitches coming out of this next chain. So we're inserting our hook and then we're slip stitching to the top of the double crochet on the other side of our hat. We're going to work back through this chain again, and this time we're going into that chain 1 space on the other side. We then skipped a stitch on our beginning chain, so we're going to insert our hook through that skipped chain and into the single crochet on the other side of our hat. We're just going to repeat that all the way down. So we have our chain with those stitches coming out of it. So we're inserting our hook, and we're going to insert our hook through the top of the double crochet from the previous, from the other side of our hat. Reinsert into the same chain again to work into the chain 1 space on the other side of the hat next to that double crochet, so just there, and slip stitch again. Then working through that skipped chain on our beginning chain, we insert our hook through that single crochet. I'll do that again with you just one more time. So we have our beginning chain where we have these stitches coming out, and we're inserting through our double crochet and slip stitching. We then slip stitch again back through that same beginning chain and into our chain 1 space, and then into that skipped chain in between our stitches. We are slip stitching into that single crochet from the previous row. And this will prevent us from creating too tight a seam on our hat, and it looks pretty neat. So we're going to continue to repeat that all the way down until we reach our seam for our ribbing, ready to seam those last few stitches in our single crochet ribbing as well. So looking for the top of the double crochet, slip stitch again, this time into the chain 1, and then we're slip stitching into that skipped chain and into the top of the single crochet. So continue to repeat that all the way across till you reach the top of your ribbing, and I'll meet you there for us to join that final section of our ribbing together and finish off our hats before we weave the tops together to bring in the top of our hat. Just working through my final single crochet. So once you've worked all the way down, you're gonna have all these ends everywhere. We need to join the ribbing, and I'm going to change to colour A. I have fastened off because I'm silly, but we need to make sure we catch that first loop from our beginning chain, and then we are going to work through just the back loop of our ribbing stitch. So rather than go through the whole stitch, we're just going to go through the back loop only, and that will give us the appearance of the ribbing joined correctly. I'm just placing over my yarn. If I'd not fastened off too short, you could just use this strand. That was my bad planning. And because we're changing colours, we're slip stitching through the loops on our hook and that last loop of the join that we made. And then we can just continue to slip stitch through the remaining stitches of our ribbing, remembering to work just through the back loop of that ribbing, or the actual stitch and the single crochet. I'm going to go through both loops of that final stitch and just do a slip stitch. I'm just going to secure that so we can have a little look at what our seam looks just by turning our hat the right side out. And that is my seam, which you cannot really see, but the important bit is the seam on our ribbing. So it's only ever so slightly noticeable. So the final thing we need to do is to cinch our hat closed. We need the wrong side where our ribbing is shown. We need the wrong side of our hats facing us. And we need quite a long length, mainly because you'll be sewing and the other end will pop through. So I'm just going to thread quite a long length. I'd say this is probably 20 inches long. And I'm just going to start at my seam. And I'm simply just going to insert my hook underneath that seam. And to weave our hats, we don't weave every single row. We're just going to weave kind of every 4 rows or so. So we're almost creating a pleat here. And we want to find that end and leave it long enough so it doesn't just disappear through our hat. And we're just coming in and out of our hat with quite a large pleat. By working through these top stitches, we're going to create a closer finish and be able to close the hole at the top without creating too much bulk in our hat as well. So we're just weaving all the way through. I'm skipping every 4 or so rows and just bringing my needle in and out, back to where we started, which is all the way over there. It's further than you think. So we're nearly there. I'm just going to come through one stitch before the other end. I'm going to take my needle off, pick up both ends and almost create a drawstring effect. And you can see that it, by doing it on the wrong side, it pushes all the unsewn stitches to the back, and we want to make sure that they are all facing the wrong side. So you might need to reposition some of these until you're happy. Before I tie them, I'm going to turn it the right side so you can see what a beautiful top of your hat you are left with. And it just makes it super neat, pulling everything to the wrong side of your project. Once you're happy with how they are set out, we can simply make a very tight double knot. Make sure you don't snap your yarn, that's the only risk. And that is your hat finished. Unless, of course, you want to add a bobble, which I will be. When it's on the head, it is a beautifully slouchy beanie. I want to thank you so much for joining me for this tutorial, and I will see you in the next one as part of this beautiful collection.